Hello, 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 beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of the USL Show. It is a great day to be back and talking about some USL. There were some awesome matches. There was a lot of drama that happened, and just a lot of fun stuff all around, and a little bit of controversy if you want to get into it. But something that's not controversial is my good friend Ryan. Ryan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, and just remember, if anyone's ever sad about their team, you're not a person who put out a wager on their college football team on Twitter that didn't go to plan and caused him to delete all of his social media profiles because of said wager. Just look up Florida State wager, and everyone will just know what I'm talking about.
It's brutal. It's brutal. That guy's having a day. That guy is having an absolute day. So, hey, we got a bunch of stuff to talk about, but not before we talk about Added Time Outfitters. Go ahead, check them out. If you use code USL, you get 10% off, and they have a whole bunch of cool stuff, including some cool Louis City stuff, who we'll be talking about very soon. They have a nice Sacramento Republic. They have a bunch of USL stuff. So check out their stuff. Get 10% off. Buy all the merch, and hey, help us out along the way. We got a bunch of interesting conversations. We've been trying to have a lot of Super League conversations. You know, we love, at least I love the Super League. I'm obsessed with the Super League. But unfortunately for Super League fans, the only Super League action was, well, Dallas getting absolutely throttled by Barcelona because Brooklyn FC had to postpone their match. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and read the statement. Um, it said during installation of the soccer turf at what is this?
The
Mayamondes?
It's the
Mayamonde?
Brooklyn minor league team baseball ballpark.
Thank you. Park. The league and Brooklyn FC identified deficiencies that have rendered the playing surface unplayable. The health and safety of our staff, players, and fans is our top priority, and this decision reflects our commitment to their well-being. The match will be rescheduled at a later date. And then it says for any season ticket holders, it's all good. You can either be refunded for this one or you can reschedule it. No big deal. It also says that if you purchase directly through SeatGeek, you can contact them and have stuff fixed that way, which is very nice. And that they are going to have a nice home opener on September 25th, which is, well, 22 days away. All right. All that is said and done. Brooklyn not off to the best start. They were a little bit late getting into everything. Officially, they don't have a coach, but they do. They're just not stateside yet. And if they're not stateside, they have another backup, kinda apparently. And then they switch kit providers. Granted, to our good friends at Diaza, which check out Kit Season, where they're going to be interviewing uh, the uh, the person who's in charge of the whole thing, Diego Hervito, who is going to be doing the whole conversation with Kit Season. And they come out with a great kit, and everybody's very excited because Brooklyn's going to kick off, and they have kind of an Oakland Roots situation, and it doesn't work out, and they don't get to kick off. I mean, where does this sit with you, Ryan? Because I mean, this just seems to be a bunch of tiny missteps and tiny weird decisions along the way. Are you concerned about Brooklyn?
Outside of their kit design, which is fantastic, again, check out Kit Season. Like everything else we've seen from the Super League has been very professional organizations who have done very good openings. Look at what the Carolina Ascent did with their home opener in front of 10,000 fans. Look at how well Tampa Bay has done. I mean, Dallas Trinity, despite the scoreline, still managed to pull a friendly against a quadruple winning team from last season, which is massive and truly one of the biggest brands in global football, which is a very testament to how big the Super League can get and how far reaching. But when you always see teams at the start of their first ever season at a club, they'll make maybe small mistakes here and there, but eventually over time this starts to add up and you're kind of getting concerned of what else is happening behind the scenes that we just haven't been able to see the light of day so far. And correct me if I'm wrong, I recall the New York Cosmos of the NASL had used the stadium in their ending days of their tenure, and they had some of their own problems with the venue. I think, granted, the stadium was in a different shape at its time. They weren't necessarily playing on turf, or they weren't able to get the priority as well. But yeah, this is. I think it's really concerning with on Brooklyn's part from what we're seeing and what could potentially be happening off camera that we're not seeing. And then just above all of that, their next home match is 22 days away, which should have been a triumphant, like, this is our home match. This is our first game. Now we're postponing it 22 days from now. And that's just a tough way to try and build a local support.
Yeah, I think the thing that is kind of getting me on this is that they've already been bizarre. They've been a bizarre team. People kind of commented on the fact that almost all of their players, their pictures look like they're being held hostage, right? And they they don't have their coach fully in order. And there's just a bunch of little things along the way that you sit there and say, how prepared were they? How prepared were they actually? And I think that it's definitely a concern, especially when you think about all the issues other New York teams have had to deal with, right? We've seen Queensboro went from existing to not existing to existing, but in the W League, to now they're New York City 2 because they bought the land. And I'm not saying that this is like a fear mongering soccer wars is going to happen, but we've seen issues in New York City time and time and time again. And this just feels like another misstep.
Yeah, I mean, and it's more just a history of, I guess, US soccer in general, that every single New York team that we've seen in MLS and in NASL and in USL just seems like they struggle to gain a foothold in the market. I mean, the Red Bulls are the longest standing team there, and they just don't play in New York to begin with. New York City FC has played in a billion different venues and probably have played in a billion more in the future as they still try to figure out their situation. And it just seems like it's a challenging market for any team to gain a foothold in, and especially just to start a team. So to see a lot of these, I guess, mistakes that we've had to start the year is discouraging. And it really, it's a questionable sign from the league on if they should have pushed to have Brooklyn start this year, or maybe let them delay and start in 2025 when they were more ready.
Well, someone correct me on the professional standards, right? But my understanding is you had to have 8 teams to start a Division 1 sanctioned league. And if that's the case, it feels like the league had no choice than to start now if they wanted to start now, which I think by the USL standards, if they would have pushed everything back a year, another year, mind that, then it would have seemed like an even bigger failure. I don't know.
Yeah, it really put the league kind of into a tough place. But yeah, if we're going to have teams putting pressure on other teams to be ready, it I guess there's not really a right answer within this situation other than that you hope Brooklyn, once they do get things sorted, that they can figure it out because Brooklyn definitely deserves a team. They deserve one side to call their own. I've always been a proponent that every borough of New York could host a professional soccer team in this country. They have the support, they have the financial backings behind their fans there. It's something that I'm rooting for Brooklyn to succeed in.
Well, as we go ahead and move on from this match, I want to go ahead and thank our wonderful, beautiful patrons Harry Austin, John Hunt, Frank Anthony, Aaron J., Christopher Cohn, John Fuller, Joshua Duder, Michael Fuchs, Noah Telford, Alberto Aguilar, Jeremy Churchman, Stephen Howard, Rion Lacara, Tim Knox, NF Fresh 30, MOS, Kunal Patel, All of the Hedgehog, Andrew Towsley. I fixed your name this time, and Timothy Meadows. Thank you guys so much for supporting us and supporting, well, yeah, just everything that we're doing. We really appreciate you. And if you want to support us as well, go check out the link in the description for our Patreon. Let's go ahead and talk about a 10-goal thriller that had 3 own goals in it. Let's just go ahead and rip through it. North Carolina FC 4, Louisville City FC 6. And it was something else. It started off with you had Rodrigo da Costa for North Carolina opens it up 11 minutes in, and then Lou City answers right back. And then you get Anderson. He gets another one. So now it's going to be 2-1 to North Carolina. Paco Craig forgets who he plays for and puts in an own goal. Malo says, I'm going to join the party. It's another own goal. At this point, it is 3-2 in favor of Louisville City. But Kyle Adams says, boy, do own goals sound like fun. I'm going to do it before the first half ends. It is now 3-3 to end the first half. Or am I missing something? Oh, no, I'm good. And then Wilson Harris decides, nah, I'm going to come out here and I'm a score, but not before Anderson gets his brace on the night. It is 4-4. A penalty goes the way of Lou City. It is 5-4. And then Wilson gets his second for his brace. We had 2 braces in this match, 3 own goals. The only person who only scored once that was on an own goal score was Rodrigo da Costa, the person who scored 11 minutes into this match. It was unbelievable. It was chaos. It was bizarre. It was everything you love about the USL.
Yeah, that was just one of those games that you were watching. Like going into this match, Louisville were actually at plus odds away from home to win this one. They were coming off that defeat against Hartford last week, but this was just as you watched it, especially through that first half, you're just like, what is happening here? Like, is this a fever dream that I'm watching? Have they just let 2 teams play this out on FIFA and they're just saying it's like go wild and let's just see what we can do here. Did someone have an overs bet on the number of goals that were going to be scored in the first half for this one? It was just absolutely insane. I mean, you're looking at this was our highest scoring single game in USL history since 2019, which also involved Louisville City as they beat Swope Park Rangers 8-3 in that one. And if you're going to look at it from the other side, North Carolina hasn't had a match where they scored 4 goals in it and failed to win since they were the Carolina Railhawks.
Oh. And on top of that, I mean, look at what North Carolina is. North Carolina has been a defensive first team. Like their defense is stunning. And you want to sit there and say, well, that's just the power of Lou City. North Carolina scored 2 of the goals for them, and the other one was a pin. I don't want to play the if you take away this goal scored, this is what this looks like. But if you take away the penalty and the 2 own goals, I mean, Lou City scores 3, which makes a little bit more sense. I mean, it's still Lou City in the end. And if you take away the own goal for Lou City in favor of North Carolina from Kyle Adams, you're looking at a match that ends, was that 3-3? If I'm doing everything correctly here, it's still an absolute insane game. If this match had ended 3-3, if you take away the own goals and the penalties, we'd still be sitting here saying, man, can you believe North Carolina scored 3 goals on Louisville? We didn't know, like, we knew they had the offensive firepower to do it, but did you think they could do it? And we'd all say, no, absolutely not. This Louisville side is different. But we'd also probably say, man, scoring 3 goals on this North Carolina team is insane as well. Man, and then you add in the own goals and penalties, and you're just looking at one of the most chaotic championship games we've seen in such a long time.
Yeah, it reminds me of, gosh, the opponent's eluding me, but I think it was Tormenta was hosting, I think Greenville. What was it, like 2, 3 years ago,
Yeah,
where they played
yeah.
out that chaotic? It was like 6-5 down
Yep.
on like a random Wednesday night in the summer. Like that would be. This is basically the USL equivalent of our "Can you do it on a rainy night in Stoke?" And it's like, "Can you do it on a chaotic 5 goal or 10 goal thriller in Cary, North Carolina?" In the
And
heat of August.
I'm
But
trying
yeah,
to
like you
remember that matchup specifically. It was one of the crazier ones we had last year where Greenville went up big and just slowly let it fall away. And I'm trying to think of what the final score line. I want to say it was 5-5. I want to say it was that match
well,
where
from
it ends
last
up.
year, they had Greenville had a 3-3. Yeah, there that was you're right on the money there. It was that 5-5 match Greenville had against Tormenta. It was their 16th game of the 2022 season.
Unbelievable.
But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely on the money there that when entering this game, I think North Carolina had conceded fewer goals on the year than Louisville has. Like, if you're going to attribute that, Louisville did have a few really high scoring conceded matches. Headed into this one, they allowed 3 goals from Indy 11. They allowed 3 goals from Tampa Bay. Rhode Island scored 5 on them. But like, if you look on the other side with North Carolina, outside of the one game that they had where Charleston scored 5 on them, they were a very defensively stout team. But then you flip it on the other side offensively, they typically didn't score as many goals. They've had 3 games this year where they scored 4 goals, and 2 of them came up against Miami, which is, well, I mean, congrats to Miami for finally getting a win for the first time since April, but it was Miami out of this. But yeah, like what an absolutely just crazy game to look back on. And you really have to feel for North Carolina to not get something out of this match. And it just feels like it's more Louisville knows what Louisville does, and they just get another win.
Yeah, no kidding. It it was just fun. And that's just kind of what it comes down to. And there were a lot of matches this weekend that were just not fun, I guess. And there were some good ones, but this one was just chaotic, fun, everything you wanted. And speaking of chaotic and fun and everything you wanted, oh my word, Ford Masson takes down Union Omaha in penalties, where they also had a own goal go their way, where they're up 2-0, where Wolfgang Prentice, top tier name in the USL, by the way, scores in the 2nd minute, and then they get an own goal to go their way in the 23rd, and then here comes Union Omaha. Bang, bang, boom. It is 3-2. Omaha's flying, and cometh the man, cometh the hour. Christian Chaney, the 85th minute, forces it to extra time. Well, not extra time, straight to penalties, where Ford Madsen puts them away, and they go on to win, which, by the way, that gets them into the playoffs. That gets them into the knockout round where they had to win it, and they did. And end up being an insane final day where you see Greenville miss out by 2 points to Charlotte Independence. Union Omaha gets in on being the most goals scored, and they needed all 3 of those goals to get through on this. It ends up being awesome, and Ford Masson goes full bingo, and nice little Twitter beef where even Omaha likes to remind them that it's not the biggest match in their club's history, but for Ford Masson to say we're just trying to sell tickets, babe, basically, everything about it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this was a very, like, impressive display from the Jägermeister Cup, like, a really banner decision from USO1 to start this season, like, through all 8 group stage games for every team. It was exciting. It was very high scoring. The minimum number of goals you saw, from teams in the group stage was 8. That at least averages out to you got at least 1 goal a game for the worst teams of this, and then Omaha was able to get 16 goals out of their group stage, averaging 2 goals a game for this. And then even throughout all of that game where you had Madison and Omaha, no, with this match, they still both made it into the knockouts, and that would be such a spicy final if they were able to meet each other at that final on September 28th. As it stands, you'll have Northern Colorado as the priority for hosting any final as the number 1 seed. If Madison or Charlotte, they would be able to host if Omaha were to beat Northern Colorado in this one. But yeah, this was just a really exciting Jägermeister Cup. Charlotte, to kind of talk about that, they got their first win in Greenville for the first time, I think, in their series history as well. And that was also a game I did call in my weekly predictions article, #ad. But honestly, the 4 teams that we have right here can make a case that they're 3 of the best teams that are currently playing in the league stage right now of USO1. And then it was a team that just got incredibly hot in the Jägermeister Cup and stormed their way to the number 1 seed, pun not intended.
I mean, let's talk about these teams that, made the Jägermeister Cup, where you talk about it, where Northern Colorado, they are first, and they're taking on the number 4 Omaha, who gets in on goals scored. And you have Madison hosting Charlotte. And you talk about the top teams in just USL League One. Number 1, Charlotte Independence. Number 2, Union Omaha. Number 3, Ford Madison. Number 4 is One Knox, who, don't forget, they barely missed out on these playoffs, where if Ford Madison were to have just drawn this match, I believe it would have been One Knox who would have been the ones through if they would have just lost on penalties as opposed to their win. And then you have Greenville, who, had they beaten Charlotte Independence, would have gone through. And then you have Northern Colorado in League One. And don't forget, Northern Colorado had one of the worst starts this season that you could ever ask for. It was horrific. It took them, what, a full month for them to get themselves right? And they kind of got themselves right in the Jägermeister Cup, where both teams are incentivized to score. It let NOCO build up some momentum and try more attacking systems. And it's led to them scoring goals and winning games, where you're seeing the best for the best 6 teams in the league in these knockouts. So it's not like we have some fluky situation. You're still seeing the top of the top going for a shot of glory.
What I think is going to be really interesting to kind of look at in anticipation of this knockouts, we have the semifinal for Northern Colorado in 8 days' time as of recording. Thing is, they are about to start this weekend on a 3-match road span in the league, and within that time, before so they'll have Lexington on the weekend at home, then they'll have this home match against Omaha. Oh, after that, they'll play Omaha again in the league. These 2 teams are going to see a lot of each other over the next week. And I do think we've always said this within USO1 as in that context, that playing at home is such a massive draw for teams here, that having this big homestand for Northern Colorado, I think, is something that could carry them into the final if I had to pick a winner now.
Well, in terms of Colorado, I mean, Colorado Springs has been on fire. They dispatched of Memphis 901 earlier this week on a scoreline of 3-1. And then they go down to Tulsa, where they end up beating Tulsa 4-1. And it's kind of all the names that you sort of think it'll be. I mean, when you're looking at Damas, when you're looking at Enriquez, when you're looking at, I mean, LaCroix, LaCroix, not really a guy that you expect to score goals. Same thing for Matthew Real, where you're not expecting your fullbacks to come in and score goals regularly, sure, but it's still a bunch of the names that you know. Same thing for when they played against Memphis 901. The only goal for Memphis that was scored was Mahoney, right? And again, Ronaldo Damas and Jonah Fjolberg had got a brace in the first 10 minutes. I mean, it has been awesome for Colorado Springs and a real jolt to the system as with their wins that they have gotten, they are up into sixth, comfortably into a playoff spot.
And not just that, they're just a point behind Memphis right now for potentially hosting a home playoff game if they continue this form. This past week, having scored 7 goals over 2 games, is their highest stretch of goals scored over the course of 2 games since they've had since June. And this upcoming next 2 matches they have are absolutely massive for them as they play a Tampa Bay team who has not had a match played in 2 weeks. And then they play Charleston, who is always a very difficult opponent. But luckily, they have both of those games at home where they are the best team in the Western Conference right now at games played at home. It is absolutely massive if Colorado Springs can get into this top 4 and potentially avoid New Mexico if they can get all the way up to a 3rd seed and host a home playoff game. They could be a very dangerous team to watch in the postseason.
Well, we've talked about this team a good bit earlier on this year when they were really going through their purple patch and really just beating teams, right? Like they were really winning. And there were conversations of when we were doing our all mid-season best USL, best 11. And James Chambers was a real conversation of coach of the year so far. It ends up going down to New Mexico, but James Chambers made it a real conversation, which for me and for a lot of people, Colorado Springs was the unanimous Western Conference wooden spoon winners. It felt like they were the ones that you should pick. The talent didn't look good. It was a coach that we didn't fully trust. And Chambers has those boys rolling right now, and it just looks so good.
And they have a potential to be incredibly strong headed into the playoffs, which is so crucial for how we have USL set up. That it's always been a team that is coming flying into the playoffs. There's always the side that typically does well. Outside of this next 2 games against Tampa Bay and Charleston, and then Sacramento that they have on the final day, every other game that they have this week represents a team that is either just holding on to a playoff spot in Loudoun or a team that is not in the playoffs as well. They could really build up a huge number of points over this kind of final quarter of the season that could lead them into a strong spot looking in for the postseason.
And Edwin really puts into the chat of McGee has just been really, really good. And I completely agree. His minutes haven't all been consistent this year, but he went on a real patch here where he was getting in a goal, he was getting an assist every other game. And when you're looking at someone who can play as a central midfielder, who can play as that cam and in a pinch can come in as a striker, that's kind of what you want. And this has been a team who you're really relying on Damas to be your talisman. You're relying on him to score the bulk of your goals. So when the guy who's making the run behind him, and you also have Fjolberg who's making those runs as well to score goals, you're going to look for Damas to be your talisman, but they have, you know, 2, 3, 4 other constant threats who are going to not just score goals, but create the goals for Damas.
Yeah, and if you're going to just kind of look at their remaining schedule that they have this year, of their remaining home games that they have, the 4 against Tampa Bay, Charleston, Loudoun, and San Antonio, the only team of that quartet that has beaten or that has beaten Colorado Springs in Colorado Springs is San Antonio. Tampa Bay and Charleston have never managed to beat Colorado Springs in Colorado Springs, and Loudoun has never even visited the Switchbacks before in their history, which is always a tough adjustment whenever you have to go to one of the highest elevation teams in the league.
Well, speaking of one of the highest elevation teams in the league, New Mexico United goes down to Oakland Roots. And really, the conversation here is Mr. Dom Dwyer finally gets on the score sheet. Finally. It's a 1-0 win for Oakland, where, we kind of talked about it last week. Oakland's not doing the we won 10 games in a row at the very end of the year to barely make it into the playoffs and then we'll suddenly beat whoever we play. They're in third. And this was a real clash of top teams in the West, and the Roots came out on top. But for me, it comes down to the fact that if this is the beginning for Dwyer and he's going to be a threat on set pieces, if they can just get him going for a couple of goals of open play and let him be a nightmare in the box, that changes everything for Oakland.
Not just that, Oakland is after that victory they had over New Mexico, they're now 5 matches unbeaten. Yes, I know that they still have a negative goal differential in the table. A lot of that's going to be just the number of goals they conceded to Sacramento in that one game. You just kind of write that off. But I'll rattle off the remaining schedule that they have to end the season. North Carolina away, San Antonio at home, Hartford away, Tulsa at home, Memphis away, Phoenix at home, Las Vegas away, Birmingham at home. Outside of Las Vegas, that is an incredibly favorable schedule for an Oakland Roots team that is only 1 point behind Sacramento for second in the table and 8 points behind New Mexico. I think New Mexico is a little bit out of their reach for not just them, but for Sacramento as well. But Oakland could very well be looking at the second seed in the Eastern or in the Western Conference by season's end.
Well, you mentioned one of those teams, and listen, the Oakland Roots do it, or sorry, I'm so sorry. The Las Vegas Lights do it again. And they were down 2-0. They get 2 goals from Bennett, and Colin Shuttler puts one into the back of the net, which is tough to see. But again, we did it for Louisville and we did it for North Carolina. We wipe off the own goal, act like it didn't happen. It was a 2-2 draw. They came back again. There is no lead that is safe from this Las Vegas team. It's incredible.
I know I talk about it frequently within my weekly articles about teams who are going through goalless droughts. We're looking at a Las Vegas Light team that has not been shut out in a match since June 1st, 94 days ago, and counting that they've been through a match where they've not found the back of the net. Quite many of these games are both teams to score, including the last 6. But this is still a Las Vegas Lights team that in those last 6 games, they only lost once, and that was away at Hartford on a cross-country trip. Every other game, they managed to get a result out of, including picking up a crucial win over New Mexico as well. This Lights team just continues to find a way to get a result, and it's been one of the big surprise packages of USL this year.
I mean, we have it in the chat. Vegas is going to win the West next year. If they can continue on this, there's no reason to think that they won't.
I mean, as it stands right now, Las Vegas is a 5 seed, and they're just 1 point behind Memphis right now, so they could still very well pick up a home playoff game. But if Las Vegas is the 4 or the 5 seed, and I'm New Mexico, I'm looking at that team rather nervously if both us and Las Vegas are able to advance.
If I'm anybody, I'm with Edwin in the chat. I don't want to be anybody and play Las Vegas. I really don't. They just seem to get goals from anywhere. And how many times have we seen them now come back from a deficit, and not just a 1-goal deficit, multiple goals? It just does not seem to matter.
I mean, we looked at the Indy 11 versus Las Vegas match from 2 weeks ago, and that was all 5 goals scored in the first half that they still found a way to get a result out of it. You look at the New Mexico goal who equalized just before halftime when they played Las Vegas many weeks ago. Las Vegas still came and found a winner in the second half. This team has been, honestly, if you're going to take the moniker away from San Antonio, they've become one of the new mentality monsters of the league.
Well, speaking of mentality monsters, I mean, listen, San Antonio gets a result against the Battery, but Juan Torres with a wonderful goal in the 84th. It just really feels like that has been the season this year, where you end up having Jorge Hernandez get a goal for San Antonio, and you fully think, finally, we're going to do this. We're holding out. We're into the 85th. And Juan Torres says, "Get on my back." And it's a awesome free kick. I mean, we had a couple of really good free kick bangers this year or this week where we end up getting another one. I believe it was within the 11. And it's just stunning. And if you're San Antonio, you're hurting. If you're Charleston, it just feels like it's just another one of those matches.
Yeah, I mean, the story of San Antonio this year has just been that they are no longer the same team that they've had previously. I'm trying to look back through all of their previous results this year, but as it stands, I'm counting back to the start of May. They've conceded 6 goals past the 80th minute, and that is just something that kills a team's just mentality, to put it that way. I guess for other stats within this one specific match, I guess San Antonio can hang their hat on the fact that they've never lost to Charleston all time, and that was Charleston's first ever goal they scored against San Antonio. And despite all of that, you still have San Antonio just 5 points out of a playoff spot right now. But if you look at their remaining schedule, they still have to play Oakland, Rhode Island, Sacramento, Colorado Springs, Louisville, and Detroit. It some of those games are at home, like Louisville and Detroit are their back-to-back home games to end the season. This just doesn't seem like a schedule that is built for a side that is chasing down a playoff spot.
Well, I it just doesn't feel like it's going to be the year for them. I can't well, maybe you could find this while I kind of blab on. That final, 80 minutes and conceding goals. Who was it a few years ago that we kept talking about? It was it was Red Bulls too, the Baby Bulls, where a couple of years ago they were in almost every single match. I mean, maybe it was 2021, whichever one was their last year in the league, and they were in every match. It was a tied game, or they were up, and then they would just ship goal after goal. The moment it hit 80, it felt like they kept getting scored on. And it kind of feels the same way for San Antonio. Not as bad as what the Baby Bulls were that year, obviously, but it it sort of has the same vibe of the anti Las Vegas of, if you have a lead, it's not safe. But in this case, if San Antonio has the lead, it's not safe.
And that number 4 San Antonio through the season is they've conceded 7 goals past the 80th minute. Some of these goals didn't end up having any consequence on the actual match. It was either the match was already result was already determined. It's just one of those that as a manager, you hate to see your team either not be able to finish out games or not be able to make scorelines respectable. And conceding anything past the 80th minute is just one of the most deflating things that you could have, right up there with conceding right before halftime or so. It just, from what we've seen of San Antonio from previous years, this is just not what you would expect from what you know about the history of this team in this league.
Well, let's get to one other team that you had mentioned, so I don't appear to be a Dodger, if you will. Rhode Island wins 2-0 over Birmingham, where Rhode Island eventually just kind of outplays Legion at the very end. And man, the scenes in Rhode Island when the first goal goes in was awesome, because everybody in Rhode Island knows how much that it means to keep on winning. There have not been many teams to be an expansion team and make the playoffs in their first year as an expansion crowd. If Rhode Island can hang on, I mean, they are looking to make history.
Yeah, I'm trying to scroll back through some of the previous ones. We had Detroit, who made the postseason in their first year, but they weren't hosting a playoff game. The immediate one that always comes to mind is how successful Sacramento were in
Yeah.
2014 when they won, obviously, the league in year one. But you're looking at Rhode Island right now, who's just 1 point behind Detroit in the table for that fourth spot. I think personally, the top three in the Eastern Conference, they're already set, probably in that order. They're going to be hosting home playoff games. It's the three usual suspects that you would always expect. But Rhode Island is on a really good run of form right now, better than Detroit at the moment. And I think they will, at least as it stands, pip Detroit to that number 4 seed if it was down to just these two teams at the moment. Indy 11 is still competitive, just 2 points behind Detroit, but they've been floundering. Birmingham has now lost 3 games in a row for the first time since the 2023 season, the latter half of that year. And I just can't see Loudoun making up the ground as well if you're going to round out the top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference. Pittsburgh's really interesting because they're 9 matches unbeaten, and Bob Willie always kind of just wheels his team towards results. I just think being 6 points back of Detroit right now for the 4th seed is probably asking a little bit too much of Lilly to get them a home playoff game. So it really is pointing to, like, all signs is that Rhode Island should be hosting a home playoff game come the playoffs.
Yeah, and we get a question in chat of how much longer are Legion going to keep Sown. I think a lot of Legion fans have been asking that since roughly around 2020 or 2021. Um, it there's been a lot of stagnation, and this is nothing from an official source. So please, 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 don't act like I'm breaking news because I'm not. But I'm pretty sure his youngest is a senior in high school this year. And I have the feeling that he's going to have the job until until they graduate. Um, just, out of respect, maybe not, but that is just sort of the that's just kind of the vibe I get. I think it's time to go. I think it's time for Legion to move on. I I've been very complimentary of Tommy Sohn this year. I think it's been his best coaching job he's done in Birmingham. I think that's still true, but it's very obvious that a lot of this team has given up, and so there clearly needs to be a shakeup, which is what makes this Rhode Island match so fascinating, is that it's chock full of former Birmingham people, from the head coach who used to be the assistant coach who used to be the academy director, the former striker, the former wingbacks, the former midfielder, the guy who grew up 10 minutes from the training facility. I mean, there's a lot of Birmingham in this Rhode Island squad. And I think for a lot of Legion fans, that was like the final breaking point.
Yeah, and you put out a really good podcast last week just talking about is it time to break out the core. Shout out to John in his back 4 article who promoted that one as well. But you're looking at Tommy Stone, who's been the manager of Birmingham since 2018. He's been a manager of Birmingham longer than Greg Berhalter has been was the manager of the U.S. men's national team. Just to put that in context, it's very quick how the sport can pass some people by and just really change the landscape of the team, especially within USO, when you can see a team like Rhode Island come in and really take the league by storm, and you see all the other teams of the league kind of cycle around you, and that it takes just like one really good hire or one really good offseason, and you're looking at a team that's entirely different, like you see with Las Vegas right now. It seriously seems like it's one of those situations that it's you appreciate what has come before and how the team got its start, but it could also be time to kind of turn over a new leaf and just see what the future has in store for the team.
Yeah, we will see how that goes forward. Let's go ahead and get into some predictions, because boy, do we have some matches and just some stuff to talk about. And the first one that I just think is interesting, and we talk about it, and every time we say it, it feels ridiculous. But Louisville City versus Loudoun United is a real matchup. That is a real exciting matchup.
It could very well be a preview of a potential 1v8 matchup, but if you're looking at this series, Historically, it's 7-1 in favor of Louisville. 2019, when Loudon somehow picked a 3-0 victory in the summer of that year, was the last time Loudon got a win in this one. Frankly, when you're looking at Louisville games being played at home, they tend to blow out their opponents. They have 11 wins at home, and only 2 of them were decided by just 1 goal. I think Louisville continues their form from this past week, and knowing that Charleston is just 3 points behind them, although Louisville with 2 games in hand, I think Louisville City win.
Yeah, it's hard for you not to look at Louisville City, but my pure love and admiration for Loudon makes me want to say Loudon despite all best interest. There's also a Loudon team that's done the double on Tampa Bay, so it's not like they can't take down a giant. But I also think that this may be just how differently do we view Legion. Who am I talking about? Louisville City to Tampa Bay. We definitely view Legion different than Tampa Bay. What about kind of moving over to Pittsburgh versus Rhode Island? You mentioned unbeaten in 9 and a Rhode Island team who, again, who is also on fire, lost 1-0 to an Indy team back when that Indy team was really rolling as well. They've been on a real good stretch of form since their 2-0 loss to Detroit City.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at Rhode Island, they've really turned things around. A 3-0 victory over Hartford, a pair of draws against now a very tough Oakland team, and Loudoun, and then you get the 2-0 victory over Birmingham. What's been really interesting for me within this unbeaten run for Pittsburgh is they have dropped 6 points due to goals conceded after taking the lead in these games, including 2 that were conceded past the 90th minute, which, if we're going to talk about San Antonio, who concedes a lot of goals past 90, this streak has seemed to continue for Pittsburgh in spite of those draws that they've had to at least incur here. And you have to imagine Lily has never been one that has been super happy with getting points dropped like that. If you add in those victories, they are firmly within the hunt, or they're firmly within a playoff spot right now. And it's due to those dropped points that they're still on the outside looking in, 2 points behind Loudoun. This is still a super tough game for me to predict, so that's when I lean towards draw, but it would not surprise me if Rhode Island can come into Highmark and get a win.
Color me shocked that Rhode Island would also get a draw. I mean, the team with 13 draws taking on the team with 11 draws. It feels like it's a draw, right? I mean,
it may as well be art school.
I mean, if we're looking at Rhode Island, who, if they draw this match, ends up breaking the single season draw record, with Pittsburgh not too far behind. So there's that. If I'm having to pick one, I feel like I'm leaning Rhode Island, but also Pittsburgh at home is just another monster. Let's see, a game that might be interesting depending on if they can keep it up. How about this Miami team, which, oh, by the way, that was this week's USL Tactics Show. Let's go ahead and hear
The
about
Miami
that.
FC are in the win column for the 3rd time this season and the first time at Pitbull Stadium, and they got there without really changing their basic approach. This is a team that isn't afraid to sit deep, sit in a back 5 that's very flat, and almost eschews width when they attack upfield. However, because of forwards like Michael Lawrence and Frank Lopez, this team retains a real counter-attacking threat, one that often drives down the middle and doesn't rely on wingbacks to get the job done. This move fizzles out, but it's the sort of play, the sort of sequence you expect to see from Miami, and the heat map bears that out. They didn't exactly light the heat map on fire against Monterey Bay this weekend, but you can see that real nexus down the center of the pitch. They did just enough against a team that admittedly went shorthanded to get the win. You see some of the logic here. They're facing a kind of 2-on-1 in the wide area, potentially, with Roberto Molina, the right wingback, sitting low, making sure that Monterey can't get behind, can't combine to really create a decent chance. Certainly there's space for Monterey, but you never feel like that sort of 4-on-2 situation is going to go awry. However, the wingbacks retain the ability to press up at certain moments. You see Alejandro Matrano, the left wingback in this example, closing down on an opponent well above the halfway line. As a result, Joey Desart, the higher of the two central midfielders here, is going to get an interception, drive in, and create a chance right down the middle for Miami. This is what you want to see if you're Antonio Nocerino. There's structure, there's logic, and they're executing without making mistakes all the while. This isn't exactly the most consistent thing you get from Miami, but the way they held that high line, the way they goaded Monterrey into passes that just weren't going to connect was key to getting the win. This was a very strong performance for a team that's lacked them in 2024, and you hope that you can see it more down the stretch for Miami.
So, through the power of Mr. Worldwide and friendship alone, is what you just heard from John willing to sway you that Miami can beat the best team in the West?
So John did take one of the stat drops I was going to have, that they have not only won in the Pitbull Stadium for the first time, but they did it before the college football team that they shared the venue with was able to win or play a game in the Pitbull Stadium, which is just outright hilarious. If you look through the history of this series between New Mexico and Miami has beaten New Mexico before in New Mexico. They had a 3-0 victory over them in August of 2022. But as much as I would love to see Miami come in and play spoiler, New Mexico has just lost twice at home all season. They should get another win in this match.
As much as I would love to say Mr. Worldwide Stadium gets them another, or really pushes them forward, yeah, it's New Mexico. I mean, it's New Mexico. And then for what is likely to be the biggest match in the championship anyway, let's just go ahead and go on down and let's talk about this Charleston Battery versus Sacramento Republic, where Charleston, we talked about it, gets a wonderful wonder goal from Juan Torres to get a point against San Antonio. Meanwhile, Sacramento, hey, they got a nice little bye week. They got nice and rested, but they got all 3 points against San Antonio, who was their most recent match. How do you feel about this one?
This just feels like if you wanted to be a real hipster choice and go against the grain and not pick Louisville as part of your USL Cup final, this just feels like a USL Cup final matchup that you're seeing right now. And like looking at the history of these two teams in the series, all 3 of those previous games have been both teams to score. You've seen Sacramento walk away with 2 victories here, with Charleston picking up a draw in a match that featured a Sacramento red card in it historically. These are just 2 teams that are not just heavyweights of USL. Oh, they're blue blood historically. They're just what you represent as the kind of premier clubs of the league. I think that we're in for a really exciting match this weekend. I have this one down as both teams to score in over 2.5 goals in it. I'm going to lean towards Charleston just because they're playing this match at home. But Sacramento have been fairly good away from home this year. I still think it's going to be the Battery.
I mean, you can see what I'm wearing. You can figure out who I'm going to take here.
Sacramento.
Man, nailed it. I was just trying. I've been keeping Ben on the hook the entire time. I've just been keeping him here the whole time, just for me to take this off. And there's a Sacramento jersey underneath. No, I think it's going to be Charleston. Sacramento has been improving, and they look more like the Sacramento that you thought they would be. And, they do get the 1-0 win over San Antonio. They get a 2-0 win over El Paso, which those are matches they expect. But, even their 4-3 loss to Louisville City, it still felt like, okay, this Sacramento team is kind of clicking the way that you think that they should be for what we think of Sacramento. I just don't think that I don't know how close it's going to be with this being at home to Charleston. I mean, this Charleston team has seemingly gotten even better since Aaron Malloy has gone down, which is an insane thing to say about arguably the best player in the league. it is a true next man up mentality, and the entire Charleston team just feels like they're really, really clicking. I'm taking Charleston.
I mean, if we're going to look at just venue results, we always joke about the movable force against the immovable object. This is very much the opposite. Charleston has lost one match at home all year, and even then, you have to put an asterisk on it due to it being the red card that they had against the start of the Cabrera era with El Paso. Whereas if you look at Sacramento from this season, if you look at their away form, they're the best team in the Western Conference right now with just one defeat away from home, and it came at the hands of Louisville this year. Now they have 4 draws in addition to their 6 wins away from home. This is a really exciting matchup for the championship.
Well, let's go ahead and go over to League One, where we got a couple of interesting ones. Let's talk about One Knox versus Charlotte. It's a top of the league fixture when you're looking at Charlotte. And then you have One Knox who's sitting in 4th, who, if we're being honest, looks really good ever since the sacking of McKeever, where it feels like they're playing more free than they ever had before. Can One Knox take down the top of the table, Charlotte Independence?
I think so. What's interesting within both of these two teams is that they were each riding at least a 9-game unbeaten run across all competition entering this match. And looking at this game historically, Knoxville has never lost to Charlotte in the history of these two teams matching up, including 3 of these games that have been both teams to score. I think Knoxville actually goes in and beats Charlotte to get a victory here, and it would be the first of 2 Knoxville-based teams to have success against or in the city of Charlotte this weekend.
I guess so. I guess that is true. What, you just don't believe in the Wolfpack?
Not at all. They're also a rival of my. They're also a rival of my college, and I can't believe in them. So
Are they in ECU rivals?
we have a rivalry trophy with it, so it's not nothing. They don't like to see us as rivals, but they also don't root for us and don't like us. So yeah, that kind of is a rivalry.
Is it like the Mississippi State versus Alabama is technically a rivalry game, like it's named and everything, but no one cares?
I mean, we all care, and NC State fans like to bemoan us online, so I think they care as well.
Okay, fair enough. Speaking of something that also has a trophy, how about a championship belt between Union Omaha and Greenville Triumph? A Greenville Triumph team who, well, hasn't been doing too much of the latter part of their name, where they have been without a win it's been a while. Why not July 20th? Can they get it right against Union Omaha, a team who yes, they've drawn lately, but they just don't lose that often? Can Greenville triumph away from home?
I mean, you say July 20th as their last win that came in the cup. You have to go all the way back to June 22nd to find their last league victory as well. And it's really hurt their just kind of standing within USL 1 that shockingly they're only 4 points out of first place, and they should still be a playoff team this year. I wouldn't doubt that from Greenville. I think what's going to really dictate this match right now is how Omaha is going to look as they travel to the Pacific Northwest to play Spokane right now. I think that's going to have a really big impact on their travel. But when playing at home, Greenville hasn't won in Omaha since June of 2022. I would still back Omaha to get a result out of this one. I think they win.
Another Union Omaha match that's into the playoffs. They play Spokane, and this is Spokane team who, hot and cold, can they do it at home versus the Owls?
I think Spokane needs this game a lot more than Omaha needs this game. If you're looking at Spokane, they're just 3 points above the playoff line. Although if you're looking at the bottom 6 teams of USL 1 this year, I think we're going to see 2 teams that are just going to kind of backwards stumble their way into the playoffs right now, and Spokane just happens to be at the top of that pile. I don't think they get a win in this one. I wouldn't count out a draw from this, but I would definitely lean more Omaha double chance win or draw.
Fair enough. Question from the chat, Andy King. Has anyone heard of the USLPA mandating mental health breaks for the teams? Yes. Every team is required to have a 1 week mental health break. Most of those coincide with bye weeks. So a lot of teams have bye weeks through either they had one last week, this week, or next week. And for most of those teams, those are the mental health breaks where players are asked not to come to training. If they want to train, that's on their own doing, but it's not going to be at the facility. It's just getting them fully away from soccer. Now they can go hang out. In my understanding, they can still go hang out with each other if they are friends. And a lot of them are roommates with each other anyway, but no club mandated or even voluntary workouts or anything like that from the team. So yes, that has been the USLPA mandatory mental health breaks, which is cool to hear.
Yeah, it's a fantastic addition. And especially when you get to this part of the season, it's been very long. It's been grueling. I mean, a lot of these teams have been in preseason camp starting as of the middle of February, all the way now till basically the end of August without breaks. It's a well-deserved addition into the USLPA, and it's been something that I think is very helpful and beneficial for the players.
Which is why we are pro PA on this podcast. We are pro player on this podcast. I mean, what I would do for a 1 week mental health break, and I just started again. Like, give me that week, please. So, that's all my USL thoughts. Do you have anything else, Ryan?
No other main USL thoughts coming to mind?
Lovely. So, what about some final thoughts on the night for you?
Yes, I've been going through the fun of searching for a new apartment lately. I was happy to finally at least get that sorted for a move in November. Literally moving next door from where I'm currently living. So, it's fine. It is slightly closer to work from where I'm currently at. It's just more of I'm going to have 2 weeks in November that I'll have 2 apartments, and it'll just be the hassle of trying to move things like 1 block from where I'm currently living.
Honestly, that was going to be my thing for the night too, was that we also just signed a lease. We got signed yesterday. So we're going to be spending the next basically month moving, luckily. But yeah, every time I start to move, I always tell myself I'm never moving again. And then in about a year, I'm always moving again. So here we are.
I mean, every time I move, I always think to myself, it's like, I have too much crap. I just have like so much stuff that I don't need and I need to get rid of. But then I just take it to the next place and I'm just like, well, it's here now. I might as well just stay. I'm just more happy about moving slightly closer to the train stop. Yes, it's going to turn like 10 minutes into an 8-minute walk, which is why I'm looking on Amazon to get a manual foldable scooter that I can then just take to the train and have that to make a walk slightly better.
Do you know how badly I would love to see just on one of those Razor scooters just racing down to the train?
I mean, I'll have my lunch pail in hand and then backpack on. It'll just be like I was back in elementary school again, except now I'm going into my job.
Yeah. I mean, if you showed up to your job with one of the scooters that, shoot sparks on the back where the brakes should be, I think you get a raise.
Should I just add in the light up shoes to my attire?
Light up shoes or the Heelys. Just go ahead, keep the game rolling. Just go ahead, keep doing it. Just continue it. Oh man. Yeah, we're moving, and honestly, it's so nice. We have a downstairs neighbor that is just an absolute menace, and I can't wait to be away from him. Just get me as far away from this guy as possible. We only have to deal with him for like 25 more days, and I am seriously counting them down because God, I can't stand this guy. So, But yeah, excited to move. Not excited to move, but excited to move.
That's always the feeling whenever you end up moving. It's one of those, I'm ready to get to the next place. I'm not ready to do all the steps that's necessary to get me there.
The thought of, do I hire a moving company, really crosses the mind. And the answer is probably not, but boy, am I considering it. But that is it for me today. That is it for, I think, Ryan, unless you have one last thing. No? Okay. Well, that is it for today. So there was that. Thank you all so much for listening. Again, check out the Patreon and check out Added Time Outfitters. Use code USL for 10% off. Check out goals.t if you want TV, if you want free soccer content. And for the first time and only time, because he was at jury duty today, here's Alan's voice.
Thank you for watching another episode of the USL Show.
The USL Show is now proudly part of the Protagonist podcast family. Please go to protagonistsoccer.com to check out more work. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see everyone again next time.